There's a lot in this story. It's more than just a simple moral warning by God. There's a lot of depth to this, and there's a lot of indication of the motivations of the heart and what connotes a positive society, and also what we struggle with generation after generation, century after century with regard to the poor. As Jesus said, the poor you will always have with you. So what do we do with that? It's important to us to understand this because in California, the figures are this. There's around 20% of all Californians live under the poverty line. And about 23.8%, or close, I've seen the figures up to 25% of the children in California live below the poverty line. That's 1 out of 4. And if you don't think that has an influence and impact our society, and if it doesn't mean that there's something we're doing wrong or something that we can correct, then I don't think we're listening to what Jesus says this morning in this parable. And this story it's so nuanced. It's amazing. Let's look at this together. If you look on this is on page 218 of your missalette. He's speaking to the Pharisees, and it says a few verses earlier in the Gospel of Luke that they loved money. And so he's not trying just to stick a finger in their eye. What he's trying to do is to help them to wake up and recognize the needs of people around them, because that's really what's at God's heart. This is the heart of God speaking. And he starts out and he says, first of all, he describes the rich man. The rich man is dressed in purple robes and fine linen. Purple was a very expensive dye at that time. It was made out of seashells shellfish from a certain area of the Mediterranean. Very expensive. And fine linen was, as opposed to the scratchy stuff that most of the poor would wear. So he was very comfortable, and it says he ate sumptuously every day in his home. And you can imagine his house was very big. And then Jesus compares him to the poor man. And the man was not clothed in fine linen and purple garments, but he was clothed in his sores. That was the clothing. That's the emphasis Jesus is saying. He points to the rich man's wealthy fabrics and colors and all these things, and he points to the sores of the poor man. And I find it very interesting, and we'll get back to this, that the only person named in this story is Lazarus, besides Abraham. The rich man doesn't have a name. And in our society, who has the names? It's all the wealthy. So he's showing us something here. And this rich man goes in and out of his house daily, obviously, and there is Lazarus lying on his doorstep or at his door, probably begging, and the rich man has to walk past him. How do you think he justified himself? How do you feel when you're in an area, maybe in the local town, one of the local towns, or Vallejo or San Francisco, and you're walking past people that are living on the streets? What do you do? Do you just sort of pretend, do you get your phone out, start texting? Or how do we respond to that? How do we deal with the poor that are in our very midst? They're right there. So what this man probably did is he said, well, this is not my responsibility. Or perhaps he said, that guy should get a job. Lazy bum. Or maybe his family should watch after him, or something ought to be done about that. All these sorts of excuses that the man comes up with are probably running through his head, or maybe he just doesn't even care. Maybe he just ignores it. And so what happens then through this story is the man dies, Lazarus dies, everybody dies, the great equalizer. And the rich man has a different destiny, doesn't he? Lazarus, it says, the angels carried him to the bosom of Abraham. And it just says the rich man, he just got buried. It's just like, yeah, no angels for him. And he finds himself in this place that is described as the netherworld. That sounds sort of intimidating, doesn't it? In the Hebrew and in Jesus Aramaic, they would have been called Sheol. And believe it or not, Lazarus and the rich man are in the same domain. That Sheol is a place where everybody in Hebrew tradition, their teachings, everybody went to this place until the resurrection or until later. And so, but the difference is that there's the good Sheol and there's the bad Sheol. And Abraham goes to, in Abraham's bosom is the good Sheol. That's the place of comfort. That's the place of acceptance where you're in the favor of God. The rich man is in the bad Sheol, which is, we can think of like the fires of hell almost. It's a place of torment. And there's this great reversal has occurred. And as this man, the rich man, is trying to find some relief, did you notice how he treats Lazarus? He treats him in the same way he would have treated him in this life. He hasn't recognized yet that things have changed. It's no longer his will over a person like Lazarus who has no power. The poor in this world are at the mercy of the wealthy and the powerful. Not in the next world. So we have this great reversal that's occurred. And so he says things like this. He says, well, have him come dip his finger in it, and put it on the tip of my tongue. No consideration for Lazarus at all. What Lazarus would have to go through these fires to get to him or anything like that. And Abraham shuts him off. And then he says, well, send him then, make him go, rise from the dead and go warn my brothers. And then he says something interesting. He says it wouldn't matter. They have Moses and the prophets. They're not going to listen to Moses and the prophets, what God has already said. Why are they going to listen to somebody else? Interesting stuff, this whole understanding of this rich man and the netherworld. And the lesson, if we were going to take something from this, is this. There's enough for everybody. There's enough surplus, there's enough food, there's enough money, there's enough for everybody if we could get past the idea of not what we want and our own selfless persuasions and desires, and instead ask ourselves, well, what does God want? What is God telling us to do with our money, with our time, with the value of the valuable things that have been given to us? Are we good stewards? Are we going to recognize that other people also deserve, as children of God, as creations of God, as made in God's image, deserve some sort of help along the way? When I was a few years ago, and we're still working on this, I apologize it's taken longer than we intended, but a few years ago, we did a survey of the congregation here. We asked them, what is important to you? Every month we take collections, and a lot of times people think, well, the money is just... By the way, this is not my stewardship homily. Don't worry. Well, a lot of people think, well, the government pays for everything. Well, not so. The great basic worship stuff is provided by the government, but everything else we do, all the trips, all the things that we do, all the extras, workshops and so forth are paid for by you. And also, at the end of every month, like today, we have what's called a designated offering. And a designated offering is a gift, is given to a charity or a nonprofit to help them. We don't have to do it once a month. But as Catholics, I know that this is important to you as well. For example, today, your offering is going to the Alpha Pregnancy Center in Vacaville. This place that helps women who are pregnant, who are unmarried, or who have no place to go. They provide help for them. They help them with the prenatal. All these sorts of things that are necessary in order to have a safe pregnancy. These are things that we do because we recognize God's need in somebody else, God's will. God makes this personal. God says you're here more than just to take care of your own needs and your family's needs. It's not just me against the world. God says you need to find God in your neighbor. Turn to that page 995. I find it very interesting that the Gospel of Matthew does not have the story of Lazarus and the rich man, but it has the separation of the sheep and the goats. And the Gospel of Luke does not have the parable of the separation of the sheep and the goats, but it has the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. Do you see what they're doing? It's like they got together and decided, well, you take this parable and I'll take that one because they're teaching the same thing. Now, you know about the separation of the sheep and goats at the end of time, Jesus as the king, he calls all the nations before them and he separates the nations as if sheep and goats. The sheep are the good guys. The goats are the ones that didn't do too well. So look at page 995. And if you look down to verse 41, the first column, this is what he says to the goats. Then he will say to those on his left, "Depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink." That sounds like Lazarus. "I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me." Now skip down to verse 45. Jesus, he, the king, will reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me." Ouch. And so I have a question for you this morning. Who's on your doorstep today? Who's on your doorstep? Do you notice the rich man, he didn't have to go looking for Lazarus. Lazarus was right there. And yes, we live in this very large, most of us live in this very large gated community called Travis Air Force Base. So we don't always have the needs aren't right outside our doors, but they're right in the towns next to us. And it also comes onto the base. Did you know there are homeless people that are at Travis right now? A lot of them don't have anything, and so they fly Space A from place to place. Sometimes they sleep at the fitness center. The Knights of Columbus often will find a person like that and pay for their bus fare to get them home to somebody, hopefully, who loves them. Who's on your doorstep? You don't have to look far. It's not like God has got a big stick over you. He's going to hit you if you don't do it exactly right. God is just saying, open up and find me in the person next to you. They're everywhere. The person who is struggling, the person who is having trouble, the person who has psychological problems and nobody wants to be around, and the people that are even a little scary. And God says, go there. Find that person. There are a lot of Lazaruses out there, and you need to respond to that. And so do I. I'm not off the hook. It's not easy to do. It puts us out of our comfort zone. And it's not just individually. It's not just this person, you do this, you do that. It's not just even corporately. I would say even it's at a national level, the church can respond and our country can respond. Let me read something to you. This blew my mind. Has anybody ever been to, of course some of you have been. Raise your hand if you've been to the Statue of Liberty. Okay. Did you see the poem on the pedestal? How many have seen the poem on the pedestal? I will give somebody $1,000 to give to charity. No, I won't do that. Can anybody tell me the name of the writer of the poem? Okay, I'm going to read a couple lines to you from this poem, and this speaks the words of Jesus. This is as if the Statue of Liberty is saying this to the world. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, the tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. Does anybody know the name of that? Anybody at all? Okay, I don't have to write a check. Catch this. Her name is Emma Lazarus.